It was a cold, biting morning in downtown Chicago, the kind where frost clung to every surface and the wind sliced through layers of clothing like a knife. I remember it vividly because that day changed everything. For me, for him, and for so many others. I was standing outside my tiny apartment building, bundled in a threadbare coat, trying to scrape together enough courage to face another grueling shift at the diner. My hands were trembling, not just from the cold but from the weight of bills piling up on my kitchen counter, unpaid rent notices stuffed into my mailbox, and the gnawing guilt of not being able to give my 6-year-old son, Liam, the life he deserved. That's when I saw him. He was hunched over on the sidewalk across the street, his silhouette blending into the grayness of the cityscape. A tattered blanket barely covered his shoulders, and his face, what little I could see beneath the dirt and stubble, was etched with exhaustion. His hair was matted, wild, almost animalistic, as if it had been years since anyone had shown him kindness or care. Something about him struck me deep in my chest, a mix of pity and recognition. I'd seen that look before, reflected back at me in the mirror during some of my darkest nights. Without thinking, I crossed the street. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though gravity itself was trying to pull me back. "Hey," I called out softly, my voice cracking against the howling wind. He didn't respond at first, just stared blankly ahead, lost in whatever abyss his mind had retreated to. But then, slowly, painfully, he turned his head toward me. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. They weren't empty like I'd expected. They burned with something raw and unspoken. A plea, maybe, or perhaps defiance. Whatever it was, it hit me hard. "I'm sorry," I said finally, surprising even myself. "I don't have much, but do you need anything? Food? Coffee?" His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Instead, he shook his head almost imperceptibly, as if rejecting charity wasn't pride but survival instinct. And yet, there was something else there too, an ache that went beyond hunger or cold. It was written all over him, the way his fingers twitched nervously, the way his gaze darted around like he was waiting for someone, or something, to strike. Then it hit me. It wasn't food or warmth he needed most. It was dignity, respect, to feel human again, even if only for a fleeting moment. And that's when I made a decision that would spiral my life into chaos and ultimately redemption. "Wait here," I told him firmly, already turning back toward my apartment. "Just wait." Back inside my cramped apartment, I rummaged through my closet with frantic urgency, pulling out an old pair of scissors and a comb I hadn't used in months. My heart pounded as I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and shoved everything into a plastic grocery bag. This was insane, completely reckless. What was I doing? Offering a free haircut to a homeless man on the streets of Chicago? It wasn't exactly going to solve world hunger or fix either of our lives. But something inside me refused to let this go. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the stubborn belief that small acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways we couldn't predict. Either way, I wasn't backing down now. When I returned to the sidewalk, he was still there, sitting cross-legged on the curb with his head bowed low. For a second, doubt crept in. Was this crossing some invisible boundary? Would he even want this? People walking by shot curious glances our way, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright judgment. One woman muttered under her breath about enabling as she hurried past, clutching her designer handbag tighter. I swallowed hard, ignoring the knot forming in my stomach. Screw them. If they thought I was wasting my time, fine. At least I'd be doing something instead of pretending the world's problems didn't exist. "Okay," I said, kneeling beside him and spreading the towel awkwardly over his shoulders. "This might not be perfect, but I promise I'll do my best." He looked up at me then, his eyes sharp and searching, like he was trying to figure out whether I was serious or just another person who'd eventually walk away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded once, a silent agreement. That nod sealed it for me. No turning back now. The first snip of the scissors broke the tension hanging between us. The sound echoed louder than I expected, cutting through the hum of traffic and distant chatter. As strands of hair began falling to the ground, I focused on the rhythm of the blades, letting muscle memory take over. Each cut felt deliberate, purposeful, as though I wasn't just trimming hair but unraveling layers of neglect and despair. His posture shifted subtly. He sat straighter, his shoulders relaxing inch by inch. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional. You could see it in the way his breathing slowed, the way his jaw unclenched. He wasn't just getting a haircut, he was reclaiming a piece of himself. But the stares kept coming. Passers-by slowed down, craning their necks to get a better look. Some whispered behind cupped hands, others snapped photos on their phones without shame. I gritted my teeth, refusing to meet their gazes. Let them judge. Let them gawk. None of them understood what this moment meant. Not for him. Not for me. By the time I finished, his hair was neatly trimmed, framing his face in a way that softened its harsh lines. When he caught sight of his reflection in the shiny surface of a nearby car window, his expression shifted. Shock, disbelief, then something softer, gratitude, maybe, or relief. He ran a tentative hand over his scalp, exhaling deeply, as though he'd been holding his breath for years. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice rough but sincere. It was the first word he'd spoken since we met, and it hit me harder than I anticipated. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away quickly. This wasn't about me. Not really. As I packed up my makeshift barber kit, reality crashed back in. What had I just done? Sure, it felt good in the moment, but how long would that feeling last? And more importantly, what consequences would follow? I barely had time to process the whirlwind of emotions from the morning before disaster struck. I arrived at the diner later that afternoon, still buzzing with adrenaline from the encounter. My coworkers greeted me with raised eyebrows, clearly intrigued by the snippets of gossip circulating faster than the coffee orders. Before I could clock in, Sarah, one of the waitresses, pulled me aside, her face pale with concern. "Did you hear? Someone posted pictures online of you giving that guy a haircut," she whispered urgently. My stomach dropped. Of course they did. Social media never slept, especially when it came to drama involving people like me, broke, struggling, and desperate enough to make headlines. Before I could respond, the manager stormed out of his office, his face flushed with anger. "You," he barked, pointing a finger at me like I was some criminal caught red-handed. "What the hell is wrong with you? Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" His voice carried across the diner, drawing stares from customers and staff alike. Humiliation burned hot in my cheeks as I tried to explain, my words tumbling out in a jumbled mess. It wasn't about publicity, it was just, I wanted to help someone, but he wasn't listening. His rant escalated, accusing me of embarrassing the business and setting a bad example for the team. By the time he fired me on the spot, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely sign the termination paperwork. The walk home felt endless, each step heavier than the last. My mind raced with panic. How would I pay rent? Buy groceries? Keep the electricity running? The weight of failure pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling while Liam played quietly in the corner, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Guilt gnawed at me. How could I have been so reckless, so selfish? All I'd wanted was to do something good, and now I'd jeopardized everything. Hours passed in a haze of self-loathing until a sharp knock at the door jolted me back to reality. Dragging myself off the couch, I opened the door to find two men in suits standing there, their polished shoes gleaming against the worn hallway carpet. Behind them loomed 5 sleek black limousines parked along the curb, their tinted windows reflecting the dim glow of streetlights. My heart skipped a beat. Who were these people? And why were they here? One of the men stepped forward, extending a hand. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his tone calm but commanding. Numbly I nodded. "We're here on behalf of Mr. James Whitaker. He'd like to speak with you." My mind reeled. James Whitaker, the billionaire philanthropist whose name dominated news headlines? What could he possibly want with me? Fear and curiosity warred within me as I hesitated, gripping the edge of the doorframe for support. The man must have sensed my unease because he added gently, "Please don't worry. This isn't about trouble. Quite the opposite, actually." Against every instinct screaming at me to slam the door shut, I stepped aside and let them in. As they explained the reason for their visit, shock rippled through me like a tidal wave. Apparently, Someone had sent those photos of me cutting the homeless man's hair directly to Whitaker's foundation. Moved by the gesture, he wanted to meet me personally. To thank me, they said. To offer help. Help! The word hung in the air, heavy with possibility. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what that might mean, a lifeline thrown into the chaos of my life. But suspicion lingered. Why would a man like James Whitaker care about someone like me? What strings came attached to his generosity? Still, as I glanced at Liam playing innocently nearby, I realized I didn't have the luxury of skepticism. We needed help. Desperately. With trembling hands, I accepted their invitation. The ride to James Whitaker's estate was surreal, like stepping into another world entirely. The limousine's plush interior contrasted sharply with the cracked vinyl seats of the bus I usually took to work. Every detail screamed wealth, from the soft leather upholstery to the crystal glasses of sparkling water offered by the impeccably dressed chauffeur. As we glided through the city streets, I couldn't shake the feeling of being utterly out of place, like a stray cat wandering into a palace. My palms were slick with sweat, and my mind raced with questions. What did he want from me? Was this some elaborate prank? Or worse, a setup designed to exploit my vulnerability? When we arrived at the sprawling mansion nestled on acres of manicured grounds, my breath caught in my throat. The house was breathtaking, its grandeur both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Gilded chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors, and towering windows framed panoramic views of the surrounding gardens. Despite the opulence, there was an understated elegance to the space that somehow made it feel less ostentatious and more lived in. It was clear that money had built this place, but care had shaped it. James Whitaker greeted me in a study lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, his presence commanding, yet oddly disarming. He was younger than I'd imagined, mid-40s at most, with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through me. Dressed in tailored slacks and a crisp, white shirt rolled casually at the sleeves, he exuded confidence without arrogance. "Miss Carter," he said warmly, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." His handshake was firm but gentle, and his smile put me slightly at ease. Still, I couldn't help but brace myself for what came next. After exchanging pleasantries, he gestured for me to sit, then leaned forward, his expression shifting to something more serious. "I'll get straight to the point," he began, his voice steady and measured. "Your act of kindness, it resonated deeply with me. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was genuine. In a world obsessed with appearances, you chose humanity." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. No one had ever described my actions in such terms. Most days, I barely recognized them myself. They were born out of necessity, survival, or sheer stubbornness. Yet here was this man, validating something I dismissed as insignificant. Then he revealed the twist that left me speechless. "The man you helped yesterday," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "was my brother Michael." My heart stopped. I replayed the encounter in my mind, the haunted eyes, the tremor in his hands, the way he'd seemed so broken, yet fiercely alive. Could it really be true? Whitaker nodded, reading the disbelief on my face. "Michael has struggled with addiction for years. He disappeared months ago, cutting ties with everyone who cared about him. When those photos surfaced, showing him receiving compassion from a stranger, it gave me hope. Hope that maybe he's ready to come back, to fight for himself again." Tears welled in my eyes as the pieces clicked into place. That flicker of recognition I'd felt when I first saw him, it hadn't been coincidence. Somewhere deep down, I'd known there was more to his story. Now, faced with the truth, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the pain he'd endured, and relief that my small act might have sparked something bigger. "But why tell me all this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why involve me?" Whitaker smiled faintly, his expression tinged with gratitude. "Because you reminded me of something I've spent years forgetting, that sometimes the simplest gestures carry the most weight. You didn't know who he was, and you didn't ask for anything in return. That's rare, and it deserves to be rewarded." Before I could protest, he outlined his plan. He wanted to fund a community initiative aimed at helping people like Michael, those battling homelessness, addiction, and despair. But he insisted it bear my name. The Carter Foundation, he said simply, as though it were already a done deal. A symbol of what one person can achieve when they choose kindness over indifference. I sat there, stunned, as the enormity of his offer sank in. This wasn't just charity, it was partnership. Redemption wrapped in opportunity. For the first time in years, I felt like I mattered, not because of what I lacked, but because of what I could give. The days following my meeting with James Whitaker were a blur of activity and emotion. News of the Carter Foundation spread rapidly, fueled by Whitaker's resources and influence. Reporters swarmed my tiny apartment, eager to capture the rags-to-riches narrative of a single mother turned accidental philanthropist. At first, I resisted the attention, uncomfortable with the spotlight. But Whitaker encouraged me to embrace it, not for fame, but to amplify the Foundation's mission. People need to see your story, he told me firmly. They need to believe that change is possible, even in the darkest moments. With his guidance, I dove headfirst into building the Foundation. We secured a modest storefront in a struggling neighborhood, transforming it into a vibrant hub of hope. The space buzzed with energy. Volunteers painted murals on the walls, donated furniture filled the rooms, and shelves overflowed with supplies collected from generous donors. Every detail reflected the spirit of resilience I'd come to embody. I hired counselors, social workers, and mentors, ensuring that anyone who walked through our doors would find not just aid, but understanding. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Skeptics questioned my qualifications, dismissing me as a pawn in Whitaker's PR machine. Others accused me of exploiting Michael's plight for personal gain. Their words stung, reopening wounds I thought had healed. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering if I was truly equipped to lead such an ambitious project. Doubt gnawed at me, whispering that I'd bitten off more than I could chew. It was Michael who pulled me back from the brink. One evening, as I sat alone in the Foundation's office, overwhelmed by paperwork and mounting pressure, he appeared unexpectedly. Clean-shaven and wearing clothes that fit properly, he looked almost unrecognizable from the man I'd met on the street. "You saved me," he said simply, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "Now let me save you." Over the weeks that followed, Michael became my confidant and ally. He shared his experiences openly, helping shape programs tailored to the unique struggles of those we served. Together, we crafted workshops on job training, mental health support groups, and housing assistance initiatives. His insight proved invaluable, grounding the Foundation in authenticity rather than idealism. Slowly, the criticism faded, replaced by stories of lives transformed, stories that silenced even the harshest detractors. Yet the greatest reward came not from accolades or media coverage, but from witnessing the impact firsthand. I'll never forget the day a young woman named Elena walked into the center, her face gaunt and her eyes hollow. She reminded me so much of myself, desperate, defeated, clinging to scraps of hope. Through the Foundation's programs, she found stability, a safe place to stay, counseling to confront her trauma, and eventually, a part-time job that reignited her sense of purpose. Months later, she returned to volunteer, her smile radiant and her gratitude boundless. "You gave me my life back," she told me, tears streaming down her cheeks. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just rebuilding others' lives. I was rebuilding my own. Through it all, Liam remained my anchor. Watching him thrive in this new chapter of our lives filled me with a joy I hadn't known was possible. He attended school proudly, telling classmates about Mom's big project with a sparkle in his eye. For the first time, I felt like I was giving him the future he deserved, not through material wealth, but through values of compassion, perseverance, and integrity. Looking back, I see now how far I've come, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. The woman who once cowered under judgmental stares had grown into someone unafraid to stand tall, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Kindness, I learned, isn't just an act. It's a mindset, a choice to see potential where others see failure. And sometimes, the smallest spark can ignite the brightest fire. Sitting in the quiet sanctuary of my newly renovated apartment, I reflect on the whirlwind that has become my life. The walls, once bare and echoing with loneliness, are now adorned with photographs and certificates, testaments to the journey that transformed not only my circumstances but also my soul. Each image tells a story. The opening ceremony of the Carter Foundation, Michael smiling beside me as we cut the ribbon, Liam holding a trophy from his school science fair, his pride mirroring my own, and countless faces of those we've helped, their smiles brighter than any riches. Redemption, I've learned, isn't about erasing the past but embracing it as part of your narrative. It's about finding strength in vulnerability and using pain as fuel for growth. The fear that once paralyzed me has morphed into a driving force, propelling me forward with a clarity I never thought possible. Every challenge, every critic, every sleepless night spent doubting myself has sculpted me into someone resilient, someone capable of inspiring change. As I prepare for tomorrow's community event, a celebration marking the Foundation's first anniversary, I feel a profound sense of fulfillment. This isn't just a milestone for the Foundation. It's a testament to the power of collective kindness. Tomorrow, hundreds will gather, not just to applaud our achievements, but to reaffirm their commitment to making a difference. Among them will be Michael, now a pillar of the community, leading workshops and mentoring others who walk the path he once stumbled upon. Liam bounds into the room, interrupting my thoughts with his infectious laughter. "Mom, guess what? I wrote a poem for the event." His excitement is palpable, and I pull him onto my lap, listening intently as he recites verses about hope and heroes. His words remind me why I started this journey: to create a world where kindness isn't extraordinary but expected, where empathy bridges divides and uplifts communities. Tomorrow holds promises of further triumphs, yet tonight, I allow myself a moment of peace. The road ahead will undoubtedly present new challenges, but I face them with a heart fortified by experience and a spirit buoyed by success. In the tapestry of my life, each thread of hardship and triumph weaves a pattern uniquely mine, a mosaic of redemption, resolve, and relentless hope.